Two black girls step onto a school stage nervous alone. Their mom couldn't come, so they invited a millionaire, and he showed up. What happens next shakes the room and his entire world. This one moment changes everything. Have you ever watched a true story like this before? Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. The afternoon sun, usually a soft balm after the school day, hung in the sky like a dimmed promise. Its warmth felt distant, as though withheld by some invisible hand, as Elaine and Maris Godiva sat quietly in the schoolyard of Northwood Preparatory Academy. Around them, a whirlwind of other children swirled, bouncing backpacks, flying shoelaces, shouts of excitement ricocheting off the courtyard's brick walls. Laughter bubbled everywhere. Someone trilled about their costume for Friday. Another compared which parent had the newest phone to record their performance. Everywhere the girls looked, the world seemed expectant and joyfully noisy. Maris, the more reserved of the two, sat on a weather-worn wooden bench, her knees drawn up as her legs dangled a few inches from the ground. Her patent leather shoes, scuffed from daily use, tapped rhythmically in the air. Beside her, Elaine, bold and outspoken as always, kicked at a loose pebble with the frayed toe of her sneaker, watching it clink against the pavement. Everyone's already talking about their outfits. Elaine set her voice low, almost a whisper, though there was no real need to whisper. And how their parents are bringing their phones and cameras and flowers and snacks, and she cut herself off with a frustrated sigh. We're the only ones who'll be alone. Maris didn't flinch. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. At least we have Mom, even if she can't come. She didn't say it as a complaint, just a fact, one she had practiced accepting. Elaine's pout deepened, her brow creased, and the corners of her mouth tugged down in that way that always meant she was holding back something bigger than words. Grayson's mom doesn't even have a job, and his dad's taking the whole day off just to see him sing, she muttered bitterly. And Grayson sings like a frog with a cold. A silence shared and strangely heavy for their age settled between them. They both knew the truth behind their mother's absence. Elise Godiva, their mom, had only just discovered the folded flyer about the Family Day presentation that very morning. She had stood in the kitchen with it in her hand, her thumb smoothing the paper as if she could iron the disappointment out of it. Her eyes had welled up before she could even read the second paragraph. She'd spoken in a choked voice, apologizing even before finishing her sentence, explaining how Friday was the busiest shift of the week at Evening Star Diner, and she simply couldn't risk losing her job. Not after missing a day the month before when Maris had come down with that awful cough. Her exhaustion had lingered in the apartment long after she left a ghost that curled in the corners and clung to their socks. It was familiar. Too familiar. Across the street, the faint purr of a car engine broke Elaine's thoughts. A sleek jet-black sedan idled at the curb, its glossy surface flashing with glints of orange light from the sinking sun. The driver's door opened with quiet precision, and a man stepped out, a tall figure in a dark, immaculately tailored suit. He moved with the controlled urgency of someone late for something important, checking a slender silver watch on his wrist before quickly pulling a phone from his jacket. "Look at that man," Elaine whispered, elbowing her sister. "He looks important." Maris followed her gaze, eyes narrowing slightly as she studied the stranger. "Do you think he's someone's dad?" she asked, her voice hushed with curiosity, not judgment. Elaine shook her head slowly, thoughtfully. "No," she replied. "I've never seen him before." The man paced the sidewalk, in tight, efficient steps, phone pressed to his ear, his expression sharp with stress. He didn't look around, didn't notice the girls watching him. His whole body language screamed that he was running late, lost, or both. Suddenly, Elaine stood up. The shift in her body was small, but her eyes sparked with something more. Intuition, maybe. Or determination. Or both. "Let's go talk to him," she said. Maris blinked, caught off guard. "What? Why? I don't know." Elaine shrugged, her voice firm despite the vagueness of her answer. "I just have a feeling." Maris looked genuinely alarmed now. "Mom told us not to talk to strangers," she said, glancing anxiously toward the teachers scattered at the other end of the yard. Elaine didn't argue. Not exactly. "We're not going to really talk to him. We're just going to see if he's lost." She reached for Maris's hand. "It's not like we're walking into traffic." Before Maris could form a protest, Elaine was already tugging her toward the gate with confident strides. Maris followed her steps smaller, her head constantly turning to make sure no one was watching. The two of them slipped through the open gate, one bold, one cautious, heading toward the man in the suit, without knowing just how much that moment would change all of their lives. Stepping past the rusted iron school gate, the twin girls paused at the edge of the sidewalk. The city's rhythm buzzed around them, honking cars, the chatter of parents collecting their children, the distant hiss of a bus braking. Across the street, the man in the tailored suit was still on the phone, pacing with tight precision. "Let's wait until he hangs up," whispered Elaine Godiva, her voice low and conspiratorial, as though they were about to launch a covert operation. Her eyes never left the man, scanning him like a detective in a spy film. Across the street, Landon Shanley was having what could only be described as an aggravating afternoon. A misfire from his GPS had sent him to the wrong location, something that for a man who prided himself on punctuality and control was beyond frustrating. He paced with urgency, trying to find a solution. "Just tell Mr. Callahan I'll be there in 20 minutes, 30 at most," he said tersely into the phone before ending the call. His voice carried the edge of a man used to being obeyed, but today nothing seemed to be obeying him. Not time, not traffic, and certainly not his navigation app. As he slipped his phone into his pocket, he happened to glance up and caught sight of two young girls across the street, standing still, watching him with frank curiosity. They were dressed in matching school uniforms, white blouses tucked neatly into navy pleated skirts, their light brown hair pulled into tidy pigtails. They could have been the cover of a school brochure, but their expressions told a deeper story. One looked cautious, but calm. The other, sharper-eyed and restless, seemed ready to act. He offered them a small, polite smile, a mere lift of one corner of his mouth, and gave a brief, almost involuntary wave before turning back to his phone, trying once more to decipher the corrected directions. But to his surprise, the girls didn't stay put. They crossed the street, their shoes clicking lightly against the concrete. When they reached the curb near him, the bolder of the two stepped forward. "Hello," said Elaine, her voice clear and startlingly mature for her age. "Are you lost?" Landon blinked, momentarily thrown off by the directness. "A little," he admitted. "I'm looking for a business address. My GPS gave me the wrong one." Elaine nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I thought you looked important. You're wearing a suit." He let out a quiet chuckle, a sound that surprised even him. "And you're very observant. What's your name?" "I'm Elaine," she said proudly, then gestured toward her sister. "This is Maris. We're twins." "I guess that," Landon said, smiling as he slid his phone fully into his jacket pocket. There was something magnetic about these girls, the way Elaine's words carried weight far beyond her years, the way Maris hung back just slightly, letting her sister lead, but never letting her out of sight. "What's your name?" Elaine asked, looking him directly in the eye with unflinching sincerity. He hesitated for a moment, as if briefly debating whether to offer his real name, but the question, like everything about these girls, seemed too earnest to dodge. "Landon," he said. "Landon Shanley." "That's a good name," Maris said softly, finally breaking her silence. Her voice was gentle, musical, and laced with cautious kindness. "Thank you," Landon replied, "but you two know you probably shouldn't be talking to strangers." Elaine shrugged, undeterred. "You don't look dangerous, and we're standing right in front of our school. It's not like we followed you into an alley." Landon glanced around and noticed a few adults nearby, giving the interaction casual but perceptive attention. He took a half step back, just enough to ensure a respectful distance remained. He didn't want to spook anyone or these girls. "We have a school presentation on Friday," Elaine continued, abruptly shifting the topic, as children often do. "We're going to sing and show drawings of our family." "That sounds like a big deal," Landon said, engaging despite himself. "Our mom can't come," Maris offered, her eyes lowering slightly. "She works a lot. 2 jobs. She works the morning shift and the night shift," Elaine added, "all to keep the lights on." Landon felt something flicker in his chest, a tightening maybe, an ache he recognized but rarely acknowledged. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said softly, sincerely. "Everyone else is bringing their parents," Elaine said, her voice catching for just a second. "We'll be the only ones standing on that stage alone. The teacher said someone from our family has to be there." Maris explained, her voice a barely audible thread. "But there's no one else. It's just us and our mom, Elise. It's worse when the clapping starts," she added quietly. "You look around and no one's clapping for you." Landon didn't know what to say to that. He felt it deep, how matter-of-fact she sounded, how used to being the exception they were. He tried to find something reassuring, something real. "Do you sing well?" he asked instead, gently redirecting. The teacher says we do, Maris said with a flicker of a hopeful smile. We practiced every night. I'm the best in our class, Elaine declared without a trace of self-doubt. But no one will see it. I'm sure you'll both do wonderfully, Landon said, glancing briefly at his watch again, but he didn't move. He couldn't. These girls had quietly arrested him. Do you have kids? Elaine asked, bluntly, eyes squinting up at him like she was reading an answer before it was spoken. Landon shook his head. No, I don't. I'm not married. Why not? She continued, ignoring the sharp glance Maris shot her way. Elaine Maris hissed, her face flushing crimson. That's rude. Landon laughed. No harm done. I suppose I just haven't met the right person yet. Our mom hasn't either, Maris said gently. She says it's just the three of us, against everything. And it looks like you're doing all right, Landon replied, his voice carrying a warmth that surprised even him. There was a pause. Then Elaine looked to Maris as if silently asking for permission. Maris gave the faintest nod. You could be our dad, Elaine said. The words were bold, ridiculous beautiful. Just for Friday, Maris added quickly, only to sit in the audience, just to clap for us. Landon stared at them stunned. That's quite a request. You don't have to do anything, Elaine said. You don't even have to talk. Just sit there. Pretend. No one will know, Maris whispered. They'll just think we had someone. Landon opened his mouth but couldn't form a reply. Part of him wanted to say yes, impulsively, emotionally. But another part, the practical, guarded part, was screaming that this was absurd. I'm not sure that would be appropriate, he said at last, regret heavy in his voice. We barely know each other. We wouldn't tell anyone, Elaine insisted. We just want someone to see us. Maris tugged at her sister's hand. It's okay. We understand. It's not silly, Landon said, rushing to catch their retreat. It's just complicated. Everything is, Elaine replied, her voice small for the first time, especially when you don't have anyone. We have to go, Maris said quietly. The teacher might be looking for us. Of course, Landon nodded. Good luck with your presentation. I mean it. They waved politely and turned away. After a few steps, Elaine stopped and spun back toward him. It's at Northwood Preparatory Academy, she called out. Friday, 10 a.m., in case you change your mind. Then they disappeared through the gate. Landon stood motionless for several long seconds. His phone rang Jenna, his assistant. He answered automatically. Where are you? Her voice asked, half concerned, half hurried. I'm coming, he said, climbing into his car. As he pulled into traffic, the image of the two girls lingered. It clung to him more tightly than he expected. Their request, so innocent, so impossible, haunted him. Northwood Preparatory Academy. Friday, 10 a.m. He repeated it in his mind, even as he told himself to forget it. On Friday morning, the auditorium of Northwood Preparatory Academy buzzed with excited energy. Rows of polished seats were filled to capacity with proud parents and guardians, many holding up smartphones, others carrying small bouquets or wrapped gifts meant for their children after the show. There was an air of joyful anticipation, a celebratory current that pulsed through every whispered greeting and shuffled footstep. Backstage, controlled chaos reigned. Children in matching uniforms adjusted bows, straightened vests, and nervously whispered lines to themselves. Teachers gave last-minute encouragements while trying to wrangle their more energetic students into line. In the midst of all the flurry, Elaine and Maris Godiva stood in a quiet corner, apart from the main group. Elaine fidgeted with the hem of her dress, the boldness she so often carried like armor, now slightly dulled. Maris, ever careful, gently adjusted the bow on her sister's back, and then moved to smooth her own sleeves, her hands moving with practiced precision. Do you think he'll come? Maris asked, her voice low but hopeful, barely audible over the backstage noise. Elaine gave a small shrug, trying to sound casual. Of course not. He never said he would, but he didn't say he wouldn't either. Maris countered, a flicker of optimism lighting her features. Elaine paused, chewing her bottom lip. He's an important man, she said, finally trying to sound more certain than she felt. He probably has important meetings or business lunches, stuff that matters more than pretending to be a dad for two girls he met on the sidewalk. Maris lowered her gaze. It was a silly idea. It was, Elaine echoed, but her voice cracked ever so slightly. Despite her words, her eyes wandered toward the auditorium, searching. Kindergarten class line up, please, called Miss Langford, clipboard in hand. You're on deck. Remember to smile and speak clearly. The twins stepped into place, each clutching a carefully colored drawing of their family. The thick velvet curtain began to rise with a theatrical rustle, revealing the bright lights of the stage and the sea of faces beyond. Elaine and Maris scanned the audience instinctively, though neither expected to see anything different from the past dozens of families, proud and clapping none of them theirs. And then, just beyond the main seating area, leaning casually against the back wall, in the shadows, they saw him. Landon Shanley, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit and crisp shirt, stood with his arms loosely crossed. His expression was calm, but his eyes were locked on them. When their gazes met, he offered a subtle wave, more of a quiet signal than a greeting, as if to say, "I see you. I'm here." Elaine's breath caught in her throat. Maris grabbed her hand without thinking, and they squeezed tightly. He came. Maris whispered disbelief, and wonder layered in her voice. "I knew he would," Elaine replied, though her eyes shimmered with emotion she couldn't hide. Their turn came. Together they stepped into the center of the stage, feet perfectly aligned, voices steady despite their pounding hearts. "This is a drawing of our family," Elaine said, holding up her paper. "That's me, my sister Maris, and our mom, Elise Godiva. Our mom works very hard." Maris continued, her voice clear, "and she couldn't be here today, but we know she loves us very much." There was a brief hush, and then the music began. The girls sang in sweet harmony, a simple, heartfelt melody about what it means to be a family. Their voices were strong, filled with emotion, and something else too, courage. Throughout the performance, their eyes kept flicking toward the back of the auditorium where Landon watched intently. His expression had softened, his usual businesslike posture now replaced by something warmer, more personal. When the song ended, the crowd burst into applause. Landon clapped louder than anyone, and just for a moment they saw it, his eyes glistening. Afterward, as children spilled off stage and ran into waiting arms, Elaine and Maris walked slowly toward the back where Landon remained out of the way, respectful. The moment they reached him, Elaine beamed. "You really came," she said, awe and gratitude wrapped in her voice. "You were amazing," Landon replied, meaning every word. "Both of you. Truly." "Thank you," Maris said, quieter but sincere. "No one has ever—" She trailed off, the rest implied, but deeply understood. Landon smiled, and something in him stirred an unexpected but unshakable warmth. "You invited me," he said gently. "I couldn't miss it." "The other kids thought you were our real dad," Elaine added proudly. "We didn't tell them you weren't." He chuckled softly, his heart catching in his chest. "That's our secret, then." They all smiled. For a moment they stood there, just the three of them, an unlikely trio in a sea of traditional families. And yet, somehow, they didn't feel like outsiders anymore. "You were really great," he said again, almost awkwardly, as if unsure how to express what he felt. "Thanks for being our dad today," Elaine said, simply, the words as natural as breathing. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. "We have to go now," Maris said. "Miss Langford is calling us." "Of course." He stepped aside so they could return to their class. "It was truly wonderful meeting you both." They waved, walking hand in hand toward the classroom. Landon watched them go, the ache in his chest, now something different, something fuller. For reasons he didn't fully understand, he couldn't bring himself to leave. Instead, he lingered near the entrance, watching other families embrace children, bounding up to parents' laughter echoing through the halls. An hour passed. Landon had canceled the rest of his meetings. For once, work could wait. When the classroom doors opened, he spotted Elaine and Maris, instantly still glowing from the performance, chatting animatedly. They stopped when they saw him, eyes wide, surprised. "You're still here," Elaine exclaimed, running toward him. "We thought you left." Maris added, her smile more subdued but no less sincere. "I wanted to say a proper goodbye," he said. "You were incredible." The teacher asked where you came from. Elaine said conspiratorially. "We told her it was a surprise." Landon chuckled. "Very clever." A beat passed. Then the question came. "Have you had lunch?" he asked. "I thought maybe we could celebrate. Just the three of us." Maris blinked. "At a restaurant if you'd like." "We usually go home and make a sandwich," Elaine said matter-of-factly. "Mom's not home until 3. That did it." Landon couldn't bear the image of them eating alone in a quiet apartment. "I know a place nearby. They have milkshakes, the best ones in town." Milkshakes, Elaine lit up like a firework. "Can we really?" Maris hesitated. "Mom says not to go places with strangers." Landon nodded, solemn. "She's absolutely right. But maybe we're not strangers anymore, and we'll be in public. Nothing secretive." Maris studied him. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay, just this once." Elaine grinned. "I'm starving." Landon offered a hand to each of them. They accepted without hesitation. They walked to the car together, something new and quiet blooming between them, something like trust or the beginning of it. After placing their orders, burgers, crispy fries, and tall chocolate milkshakes for the girls and a grilled chicken sandwich with iced tea for Landon Shanley, the unlikely trio fell into an easy rhythm. The air buzzed with the sounds of clinking cutlery, soft laughter from nearby tables, and the clatter of plates from the open kitchen. A breeze rustled the patio umbrellas, providing a gentle soundtrack as they settled in. So Landon began trying to sound casual. "Do you always walk home from school by yourselves?" Maris Godiva nodded as she delicately peeled the paper from her burger. "Most days, yeah. Our mom Elise works at a store in the morning, then at the diner in the evening. She only gets Sundays off. But sometimes, not even then. She picks up extra shifts if someone calls out sick," added Elaine, stirring her milkshake with the straw. Her tone was matter-of-fact, but there was a tightness in it that didn't belong in the voice of a child. "That must be tough," Landon said softly, fighting back the discomfort curling in his chest. "We manage," Maris replied with surprising maturity. "I know how to heat stuff up in the microwave. We brush our teeth and take showers without help. We even pack our own lunches. I help Maris with math, and she helps me with reading." Elaine added her voice, proud and unshaken. "We're like a team." Landon didn't respond right away. A lump formed in his throat as he listened to their voices, bright but burdened. These girls had learned independence not by choice, but by necessity. "Mom says everything will get easier when she finishes college," Maris said. "She takes classes online and studies at night after we go to bed." "Your mother sounds incredible," Landon said sincerely. "Working 2 jobs, raising you both, and studying. That's no small thing." "She's the best mom in the world," Elaine declared fiercely. "But," she hesitated, poking at a fry, "sometimes we wish we had a dad too." Maris shot her a look, half warning, half embarrassment, but Elaine just shrugged, unapologetic. "It's true. Everyone at school has a dad, even Grayson," she said with disdain. "And he's a total show-off." Landon smiled gently, though the ache inside him deepened. "You've never met your father?" he asked carefully, unsure if he was crossing a line. The twins shook their heads at the same time. "Mom said he left before we were born," Maris said quietly. "She doesn't talk about him much, but we have pictures," Elaine whispered conspiratorially. "She keeps them in a box under her bed." Elaine Maris gasped. "We're not supposed to go through Mom's things. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for my sock. It's not my fault the box was under there." Landon chuckled softly, observing how effortlessly their personalities revealed themselves. Maris thoughtful and cautious, Elaine bold and endlessly curious. Wanting to lighten the mood, he changed the subject. "Do you have many friends at school?" "We have a few," Mary said, "but we mostly hang out with each other. Most kids don't get us. They think we're weird because we like quiet things," Elaine added, "and because we don't go to birthday parties or bring cupcakes. They don't know what it's like to walk home by yourself," Maris said, "or to do homework while your mom is working late." As they ate, Landon listened closely. He asked about their favorite books, their teachers, and their dreams. They told him about Miss Langford, who always wore too much perfume, and about the time Maris won a class reading contest and got a free pizza coupon. Then Elaine leaned back and asked, "Were you always rich?" Elaine Maris hissed, "That's rude." Landon laughed genuinely. "It's okay. And no, I wasn't always rich. Not even close." The girls leaned in. "What do you mean?" Maris asked. Landon looked down for a second, gathering his thoughts. "Well, when I was your age, my mom also worked 2 jobs. We didn't have much. No car, barely made rent. I wore hand-me-down clothes and sometimes went to bed without dinner." "Really?" Elaine asked, stunned. "But your car is so shiny." "That came later," he smiled. "We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for a long time. And yeah, I was home alone a lot too." "What about your dad?" Elaine asked softly. Landon's smile faded. "He was there, but not in the way that mattered. He drank too much. Didn't help much. It wasn't easy." They listened, completely still. "But how did you get rich?" Elaine finally asked. Landon chuckled again. "Hard work. I studied, got a scholarship. Then I worked more. I started a small business, failed a couple times, then found something that worked. So Mom's right," Elaine said, elbowing Maris. "If we study hard, we can get rich too." Landon nodded. "Yes, but remember, being successful isn't just about money. It's about doing something meaningful, something you're proud of." The girls nodded solemnly. When the plates were cleared and the last of the milkshakes drained, Landon glanced at his watch. He was startled to realize 2 full hours had slipped by. "I should take you home," he said reluctantly. The twins nodded, their earlier excitement mellowing into quiet gratitude. "That was the best lunch of my life," Elaine said seriously. "Mine too," Landon replied, surprised to realize he meant it. They walked back to his car together, and as he opened the doors, he paused. "Would it be all right if I drove you home? It's safer." The twins looked at each other, then Maris nodded slowly. "Apartment 302, Willow Creek Residences, Maple Street," Elaine said like she had rehearsed it. The drive was short. The neighborhood changed noticeably as they approached buildings, smaller streets narrower. Willow Creek Residences was a modest 4-story building without an elevator. Landon parked and walked them up the concrete stairs. "This is us," Maris said, stopping at the 3rd floor. She fished a key from under her shirt and unlocked the door. "Would you like to come in?" Elaine asked. "Just for a minute. We can show you our drawings." Landon hesitated. Stepping into the apartment of 2 children without a parent present was a gray area, but leaving them alone felt worse. Just for a moment, he agreed. Inside the apartment was small but warm, a combined kitchen and living room, 2 doors leading to bedrooms, a wall filled with books, potted plants basking in the afternoon light. Drawings were taped to the fridge, faded, but proudly displayed. "Mom built that shelf," Maris pointed out, "from scraps she found. And we water the plants every day," Elaine said, gesturing to the windowsill garden. Landon was about to respond when they heard keys jingling at the door. "That's Mom," Maris whispered, startled. "She's early." The door opened, and Elise Godiva stepped in, grocery bag in hand. She looked tired, but her eyes lit up when she saw her daughters until they landed on Landon. She froze. The bag slipped from her fingers, apples thudding and rolling across the floor. "Girls," she said slowly. "Who is?" But her voice faltered, because as her eyes locked with Landon's, the color drained from her face. She knew him, and he was no stranger. "Mom, this is Landon," Elaine Godiva exclaimed excitedly, seemingly oblivious to the sudden tension that had fallen over the room. "He came to our presentation today. And then he took us to lunch. We had burgers and milkshakes," Maris Godiva added, her eyes shining. Elise Godiva stood frozen, her grocery bag forgotten at her feet, apples rolling across the wooden floor. Her face, pale and visibly shocked, held a complex mix of recognition, disbelief, and unease as she stared at the man standing in her living room. "A pleasure to meet you," Landon Shanley said, instinctively extending a hand, even though he could sense something deeper, more charged, lingering in the air. "The girls invited me in. I hope that's all right." He glanced more closely at Elise. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" Elise swallowed, forcing a brittle smile as she quickly knelt to retrieve the apples. "You must be confusing me with someone else," she replied without meeting his eyes. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the calm she struggled to project, but Landon saw through it. There was something unmistakable in her reaction. He knew he'd seen her before. "Mom Landon grew up without money too, just like us," Elaine chimed in. "And now he's rich and has an amazing car." Elaine Maris, Elise interrupted, her voice tighter now. "Why don't you go change your clothes? I need a moment to speak with Mr. Shanley. Alone." The girls looked momentarily confused, but sensed their mother's seriousness. Without arguing, they headed to their bedroom, casting one last glance back at Landon before closing the door. Silence fell between the 2 adults. Elise avoided his eyes, her posture rigid. Landon studied her carefully, her tired but striking green eyes the same as the twins, and the soft lines of a familiar face he couldn't quite place in memory. "I swear I know you," Landon said quietly, stepping closer. "There's something, a memory I can't quite grab, but it's there." Elise drew in a deep breath as if summoning every ounce of resolve left in her body. Her voice steadied. "You need to leave Mr. Shanley, and please, don't come back. The girls don't need more confusion or disappointment." "Confusion, disappointment," Landon echoed, surprised. "I went to their presentation because they invited me. I had no idea you would be—" "Why would you do that?" Elise snapped, crossing her arms. "Why would a man like you spend his day playing pretend dad to 2 little girls he doesn't even know?" The question landed hard. Landon didn't have a rehearsed answer, only a raw, honest one. "Because they asked me to," he said simply. "And because when I looked in their eyes, I saw something I hadn't felt in years. Like maybe I could matter. Even just for a moment." For a heartbeat, Elise's expression softened. But then it hardened again, the door already cracked open behind her. "Thank you for what you did," she said, her voice restrained. "But it's better if it ends here." Landon lingered a moment longer, torn by a strange sense of attachment. "They're amazing kids," he said, his voice quiet. "You've done an incredible job." She didn't reply, only nodded. As he stepped through the door, something inside him stirred, something unresolved. 3 days passed. Landon Shanley couldn't shake them from his mind. Elaine and Maris with their wide eyes and unexpected wisdom. Elise with her haunted stare. The emotions that afternoon had stirred refused to settle. Sitting in his office staring out over the skyline, Landon ignored the reports stacked on his desk. "Mr. Shanley." Jenna, his assistant, poked her head through the door. "The CFO is waiting for your 2 o'clock. Landon turned. "Cancel it and clear the rest of my day." Jenna blinked. "Is everything all right?" "I just need to handle something personal," he said, already reaching for his coat. An hour later, Landon was standing inside a department store deep in the children's section. He moved with purpose, selecting uniforms, sneakers, backpacks, pencil cases, watercolor sets, items that meant something to 2 little girls who shouldn't have to go without. As he checked out, the cashier asked, "Twins?" Landon smiled. "Yes." He drove to Willow Creek Residences. Each step up the stairs felt like a question. Is this too much? Is it welcome? Will she even open the door? But then he thought of Maris's comment about saving colored pencils and Elaine's worn sneakers, and he kept walking. When the door opened, the girls screamed his name. Elaine threw her arms around him without hesitation, while Maris grinned wide. "You came back. I brought some things for you," Landon said. As they tore through the bags, their joy was electric. New uniforms, sketch pads, real watercolor paints, and then the sneakers. Maris held hers delicately. "My foot was hurting," she whispered. "But Mom didn't have money." "How did you know?" "I just guessed," Landon said, voice tight. The bathroom door opened. Elise emerged, wet hair clinging to her shoulders, and froze. She took in the scene, the bags, the gifts, her daughter's joy, and then Landon. "What's going on?" "Mom, look what he brought." Elise's face changed in an instant. "Girls, go to your room. Now." They obeyed, this time with slower steps, glancing back. When the door shut, Elise turned on him. "What are you doing? I told you to stay away." "I just wanted to help. This looks like charity. I don't want that." "It's not charity," Landon said. "It's gratitude. It's respect. It's something I can't explain yet. But it's real." Elise looked at him long and hard. She saw no arrogance, no pity, only sincerity. Her shoulders sagged. She sat on the couch, and for the first time since he met her, she didn't ask him to leave. "You don't understand." Elise said, her voice now almost a whisper, laden with a deep, weary resignation. "It's not just about the gifts. It's about expectations. They've already grown attached to you. And when you get tired of this and disappear, who's going to explain it to them?" The question hit Landon Shanley like a punch to the gut. He had never considered that. What would happen next? He had acted on impulse, moved by a connection he couldn't explain. "I'm not going to disappear," he replied, surprised by his own certainty, by the unwavering conviction in his voice. "Unless you really want me to go." Elise sighed deeply, running her hands over her tired face. For a moment she looked much older than her probable 30 years. "Look," she said finally, "I appreciate the gesture, I really do. But you have to understand, we're from different worlds. You have a busy life, companies to run. The girls they're just 2 ordinary kids." "Not to me," Landon replied, surprising himself again with the firmness in his voice. "I can't explain it, but since I met them, something has changed. I feel like I need to be here." Elise looked at him for a long time, a clear internal struggle visible in her eyes. The sneakers were really necessary, she finally admitted, her voice low and a little embarrassed. "I was saving up, but the refrigerator broke last month and—" "You don't have to explain," Landon interrupted gently. "I grew up in a house where every penny was carefully counted. I know what it's like." Something in Elise's face changed when she heard that curiosity, perhaps even surprise. "You told the girls that too," she commented, "that you didn't grow up with money." Landon nodded. "It's true. What I have today I built from scratch. And I understand your pride, Elise. My mother was just like you. She'd rather work herself to exhaustion than accept help." A small smile, the first genuine one she had given him, briefly appeared on Elise's lips. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper, "for the gifts. The girls really needed them." Landon felt a wave of profound relief. "Can I call them back? I think they were in the middle of a great discovery when you showed up." Elise hesitated, then nodded. "Maris, Elaine, you can come back," she called out. The girls reappeared instantly as if they had been waiting with their ears pressed to the door, which was probably the case. "Can we keep everything?" Mom Elaine asked hopefully. Elise looked at her daughter's expectant faces and then at Landon. "Yes," she replied softly. "And what should we say to Mr. Shanley?" "Thank you," the twins exclaimed in unison, running to hug Landon, who was surprised by the strength of the feeling that washed over him as he felt their small arms around him. "How about you try on the uniforms?" he suggested, too emotional to say anything else. The girls needed no other encouragement. They ran to their room carrying the packages, leaving Landon and Elise alone again. "They like you," Elise commented, watching him closely. "And I like them," Landon replied, simply, his gaze steady on her. "I know it seems strange. We barely know each other, but—" "I understand," Elise interrupted him, surprising him again. "They have that effect on people. They always have." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the excited sounds coming from the girls' room. "If you ever need anything," Landon said, finally, his voice soft but resolute, "I want you to know you can count on me. Not just material things. Anything." Elise studied him for a long moment, as if trying to solve a complicated puzzle. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice imbued with a quiet intensity. "Why do you care so much?" It was a question for which Landon had no clear answer. How could he explain a connection that he himself didn't fully understand? "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I just know it's important for me to be here for you all." The twins reappeared then, wearing the new uniforms, twirling to show how good they looked. Landon noticed that the quality fabric fit perfectly, replacing the worn, too small clothes they had worn before. "It's perfect," Elaine exclaimed, admiring herself in the small, reflective surface of the television screen. "And so comfortable," Maris added, running her hands over the soft fabric. Landon smiled, feeling a satisfaction he rarely experienced in his professional life, even after closing the most profitable deals. In the following weeks, an unexpected routine was established. Landon began to visit the small apartment 2 or 3 times a week, always bringing something, sometimes just ice cream or a new book, other times more necessary items he noticed were missing. Elise initially maintained a cautious distance, always polite but reserved. However, little by little the barriers began to fall. She started to accept his presence, perhaps realizing the genuine joy he brought to the girls, a joy that had been missing for too long. On a Saturday afternoon, Landon Shanley sat on the living room floor with the twins drawing with the watercolors he had brought. They had spread out old newspapers to protect the floor, and the 3 of them were completely absorbed in the activity. "Look, Landon, I drew you," Elaine Godiva announced, showing a colorful drawing where a tall figure in a suit held the hands of 2 identical girls. "That's amazing," Landon praised, genuinely impressed with the girls' raw talent. "You have a future as an artist." "I want to be a doctor," Elaine replied promptly, ever practical in her aspirations, "but I'll draw in my spare time." "And you?" Maris, Landon asked, noticing that the other twin was focused on a more detailed drawing of a large house with a sprawling garden. "I don't know yet," she answered thoughtfully. "Maybe an architect. I like to draw houses." Landon smiled, observing how distinct they were in their aspirations despite their identical appearance. He was about to suggest they paint something together when he noticed a movement at Elise Godiva's bedroom door. She was standing there watching the scene silently. There was something in her gaze, a complex mix of emotions, concern, perhaps a touch of guilt, but also, for the first time, something that looked undeniably like hope. Her eyes met Landon's, and for a brief moment, a silent, profound communication passed between them. It was as if she was finally seeing something in him that reassured her, perhaps the genuine affection he felt for the girls, the absence of any ulterior motive, the simple truth of his presence. Elise quickly looked away, returning to her room, but Landon had seen enough to understand that something had changed. A significant barrier had fallen. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, Elise walked him to the door. "They've never had a male figure in their lives," she said softly, her voice low. "They're getting attached to you very quickly. That worries you," Landon observed, not as a question, but a statement, a quiet understanding in his voice. Elise nodded. At first, yes, a lot. But now she hesitated, as if carefully weighing her next words. "Now I'm starting to think it might be good for them." "I'm glad to hear that," Landon replied, feeling a relief he didn't know he was waiting for. "They are incredible kids, Elise. You've done an amazing job raising them on your own." A soft blush colored Elise's cheeks. "Thank you," she murmured, "and thank you for everything you've been doing." not just the material things Landon, but for being present. As he walked down the stairs of the building, Landon reflected on how his life had changed in such a short span of time. Before it was just work and more work, endless meetings and profitable deals, but without any real profound connection. Now, his most anticipated days were those when he visited the small apartment on Maple Street. What had started as an innocent request to be a dad for a day had transformed into something much deeper and more meaningful. Elise closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep, shuddering breath. She walked silently to the twins' room and stood watching them sleep, their identical little faces relaxed and peaceful. In the last few days, she had noticed a subtle change in them. They were happier, more confident. The new uniforms and school supplies had done wonders for their self-esteem, but it was more than that. It was Landon's constant presence, the genuine interest he showed in their small achievements and dreams. Elise sat on the edge of Maris's bed, a lump forming in her throat. A dilemma that had tormented her for years was now taking on new, urgent dimensions. The truth she kept hidden weighed more and more heavily on her chest. Should I tell him? She whispered to herself, gently stroking Maris's hair. Does he have the right to know? The fear of what could happen paralyzed her. What if he became furious that she had hidden the truth for so long? What if he wanted to take the girls from her? Or worse, what if after knowing he lost interest and disappeared completely? But there was also another possibility, one that was beginning to seem less and less unlikely. What if he was really different from what she feared? What if he really cared about the girls as much as he seemed to? Elise wiped away a silent tear. The most difficult decision of her life was approaching, and she knew she couldn't postpone it for much longer. The clock showed almost 9 o'clock when Landon arrived at the twins' small apartment. It wasn't his usual visiting time. He usually came earlier to have time to play with the girls before dinner. But today, Elise had called, asking him to come after the children were asleep. There was something in her voice, a tension, a restrained urgency that had worried him all day. He knocked softly on the door, trying not to make too much noise. Elise answered almost immediately, as if she had been waiting near the entrance. Her eyes looked tired, with small shadows underneath that he had never noticed before. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, stepping aside for him to enter. The girls just fell asleep. "Did something happen?" Landon asked, keeping his voice equally low. "You sounded worried on the phone." Elise didn't answer right away. She closed the door carefully and gestured toward the small kitchen. "Can we talk in there? I don't want to wake them." Landon nodded, following her to the cramped but impeccably organized kitchen. The round table that occupied the center of the space barely fit 4 chairs. Elise indicated for him to sit and took the chair opposite him. Her fingers drummed nervously on the table's surface. "Want some coffee?" she offered, clearly procrastinating whatever she needed to say. "I'm fine, thank you," Landon replied gently. "Elise, what's going on? You're making me worried." She took a deep breath, as if gathering the last reserves of her courage. Her eyes, so similar to her daughter's, met his for a moment, then shifted to her own hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice almost a whisper. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Landon felt a sudden apprehension. In the last 2 months since meeting the twins, he had become a constant presence in their lives. He visited them regularly, helped with homework, took them to the park on weekends. Elise had become more receptive to his presence, though she always maintained a certain reserve. Now it seemed he would finally understand why. "Does it have to do with that feeling that we've met before?" he asked, remembering the strange familiarity he felt when he first saw her. Elise nodded lightly, biting her lower lip. "I've never been good at hiding things," she said with a sad, self-deprecating smile. "And every time you look at the girls, every time you play with them or help them with something, the guilt just grows." "Guilt," Landon repeated, utterly confused. "Elise, what are you talking about?" She closed her eyes for a moment as if making a final, irrevocable decision. When she opened them again, there was a quiet determination there that wasn't present before. "We have met," she said finally, her voice trembling but firm. "I was a waitress at that party. It was just one night. I didn't know who you were." Elise Godiva continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength. "After I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know how to find you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, with an almost tangible weight. Landon Shanley felt as if time had frozen his mind, racing, trying to process what he had just heard, trying to fit together the pieces of a puzzle he didn't even know he was trying to solve. What party, he asked, automatically, still in a state of shock. The grand opening of the Wellington Hotel, Elise replied, her eyes now fixed on his, a mixture of pain and resolve in their green depths. Almost 7 years ago, I was working as a temp waitress, needed the money for college. You were there celebrating some kind of business deal. Slowly, agonizingly, the memory began to surface. The Wellington Hotel, one of the first major projects he had financed. The opening party had been extravagant, with champagne flowing freely and the city's elite all present. He had drunk more than usual that night, celebrating the intoxicating success of the venture. You were wearing a black uniform, he murmured, the memory coming back, now vivid and stark. Hair tied up different from the curls you have now. Elise nodded, a single tear silently trickling down her cheek. You bumped into me near the restroom, she continued. I dropped a tray of glasses. You offered to pay for it, said you wouldn't tell anyone. We started talking, and we ended up in my hotel room. Landon completed the memory now, crystal clear. One night, a single night, with a beautiful waitress whose name he barely remembered. The next morning, a casual encounter that meant nothing, or so he thought at the time. I had never done anything like that before, Elise said, as if she needed to explain to justify. I was never the type of person who... But there was something about you, a connection, and I was young and you were so... She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Landon remembered the charm he had used, the sense of power he felt that night, young and newly rich, celebrating his first big success. The next morning, you were already gone, he recalled. I left money on the nightstand. Elise winced a small flinch of pain. I didn't take it. I left because I had another shift for breakfast. And when I came back to talk to you, you had already checked out. Silence fell between them, heavy with the devastating reality of the implications. Landon looked at the closed door of the girl's room, feeling a wave of emotion so intense it left him breathless. The twins, he began, barely able to form the words, his voice raw with a sudden, overwhelming understanding. They are your daughters. Elise completed her voice, almost fading to a whisper. Yes. Landon felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. The twins, Elaine and Maris Godiva, his daughters, the small hands that held his when they went to the park, the identical smiles that greeted him at the door, the curious questions about his work. All this time, he had been building a relationship with his own daughters without ever knowing. Why didn't you look for me? He asked, his voice thick with a mixture of confusion and profound emotion. I tried, Elise replied, the tears now flowing freely openly. When I found out who you really were, not just some hotel guest, but Landon Shanley, the businessman, I thought about finding you. I even went to your office once, but what I saw you leaving with a model, I think, getting into a limousine. It seemed like such a different world from mine, she explained, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, her voice tinged with the bitterness of that memory. Who was I? A pregnant waitress you would barely remember. What kind of reception would I get? What if you thought I was after your money? Or worse, if you demanded a DNA test and tried to take the babies from me? Landon closed his eyes, feeling the crushing weight of the situation. He understood her fear. At the time, he probably would have reacted exactly as she feared, with suspicion, possibly even hostility. So you decided to raise them alone? He concluded, the truth settling heavily around them. Elise nodded. I never thought we would meet again. When you showed up at that school presentation, it was like fate was mocking me. And when the girls asked you to come, and you introduced them to me. Landon began, the pieces finally brutally fitting together. I panicked, Elise admitted, her voice choked with emotion. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to tell you everything that same day, but I was so scared. Scared of what Landon asked gently, his own shock giving way to a burgeoning empathy for her impossible position. Of losing my daughters, she replied, her voice breaking. Of you using your money and power to take them from me. Or worse, of you rejecting the idea completely and breaking their hearts. Landon fell silent, absorbing it all. He looked again at the bedroom door, imagining the girls sleeping oblivious to the conversation that would change their lives forever. But you're telling me now, he observed, looking back at Elise, his gaze searching. What changed? Elise took a deep breath, her gaze now firmer, meeting his without flinching. You changed, or maybe the way I see you has changed. For the last 2 months, you've been different from what I imagined. The way you treat the girls, how you respect our boundaries, how you genuinely care. She hesitated, then continued, her voice resonating with deep conviction. They deserve to know who their father is, and you deserve to know you have two wonderful daughters. Landon felt the pieces finally fall into place. The inexplicable connection he had felt upon meeting the twins, the familiarity in Elise's face, the way he felt so comfortable in that small apartment. It all made sense now. He was a father to two incredible girls who had already captured his heart before he even knew they shared his blood. The night had been long for Elise Godiva. After Landon Shanley left, she remained sitting in the small kitchen for hours, replaying the conversation. The expression of shock on his face when he finally understood the truth. He hadn't yelled or made threats, as she had feared for so many years. Instead, he had been silent, processing the information, asking questions with a calmness she hadn't expected. When they finally said goodbye, Landon had asked for some time to absorb it all. "I need to think," he had said, his voice thick with emotion. "This changes everything." Elise had agreed, knowing he deserved that space. They agreed that she would talk to the girls first, preparing them for the truth that, in a way, they already seemed to sense. Now, the next morning, Elise felt exhausted, but strangely light, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The truth was finally out, after so many years of secrecy. Elaine and Maris Godiva woke up early, as they always did on Saturdays, eager to enjoy the day. Usually, Landon would show up around 10 o'clock perhaps to take them to the park or the children's museum. The girls were already in the living room drawing with the watercolors he had brought weeks ago. "Girls," Elise called softly, sitting on the sofa. "Can we talk for a bit?" The twins looked up from their drawings, curious about their mother's serious tone. "Is something wrong?" Maris asked immediately, always the most perceptive about adult mood shifts. "No, sweetie," Elise replied, trying to smile, her heart beating fast, nervous, but she knew she had to do this. "Actually, it's something important. Can you come sit here with me?" The girls exchanged a look, that silent communication they always had, and got up, leaving their drawings on the floor. They sat on either side of Elise on the small sofa. Elise put her arms around her daughter's shoulders, pulling them closer. "Remember when you asked me about your dad?" She began, keeping her voice calm and steady. The twins nodded simultaneously, suddenly attentive. "And I said he had left before you were born and that I didn't know how to find him." "Yes," Maris replied. "You said he didn't know about us." Elise took a deep breath. "That's right. I was never able to tell him that you existed, but something incredible happened." What Elaine asked, her big eyes fixed on her mother's face, impatience bubbling beneath her curiosity. Elise stroked her daughter's identical hair, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes life surprises us in ways we can't imagine. Sometimes people we've lost touch with reappear when we least expect it." Mom Elaine interrupted, ever direct. "What are you trying to say?" Elise smiled despite her nervousness. Elaine always got straight to the point. "Landon is your dad," she said finally, her voice soft but clear, the words hanging in the quiet air. There was a moment of absolute silence. The twins looked at each other, that silent communication once again, their identical faces, registering the same initial surprise, followed by something Elise didn't expect, a kind of understanding, almost as if a long-held suspicion had just been confirmed. "We already thought he was our daddy," Maris said at last, her voice small but sure. Elise blinked, surprised. "You thought so?" Elaine nodded vigorously. "He looks like us. He has the same smile as Maris and the same eyes as me. And he just showed up out of nowhere after we wished for a dad." Maris added with the simple and direct logic of children. It seemed too magical to be a coincidence. Elise felt tears welling up in her eyes. All this time, while she had tortured herself with secrets and fears, her daughters had made the connection with the pure, unburdened intuition that only children possess. "But you said you didn't know where our dad was." Elaine remembered, frowning in confusion. "And I didn't," Elise confirmed. "It was truly a coincidence that he showed up at your school that day. I had no way of knowing he would be there or that you would find him. So it really was magic," Elaine concluded with unshakable conviction. Elise smiled through her tears. "Maybe it was. Sometimes life works in mysterious ways. Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Maris asked, always the more practical one. Elise sighed. "I was scared," she admitted honestly, scared of how he would react, scared that he might be angry with me for not telling him sooner. And was he angry? Elaine asked, her big eyes revealing a hint of concern, a fear for the man they had already grown to adore. "No," Elise replied, remembering Landon's restrained reaction the night before. He was surprised, of course, but not angry. Is he still going to come back? Maris asked, the real worry now emerging stark and vulnerable. Elise hugged them both tighter. Of course he will. He just needs a little time to take in the news. Imagine what it's like to suddenly find out you have two wonderful daughters. When is he coming? Elaine wanted to know, already excited by the prospect. Soon, Elise promised, hoping she was right. He just needs a little time. The girls seemed satisfied with the explanation, although Elise could see they had 1,000 questions simmering beneath the surface. They spent the rest of the morning talking about Landon, about how he had entered their lives, about all the subtle clues the twins thought they had noticed that indicated their relationship. Elise listened in amazement at their perspective, realizing that in many ways her daughters had understood the situation better than she had herself. The following days were filled with anxious waiting. Elise had tried calling Landon once, but it went to voicemail. She decided to respect the space he had asked for, though each day of silence increased her worry. The girls asked about him every morning before school and every night before bed. Is he coming today became a constant question, to which Elise could only reply with a hesitant maybe or soon, feeling her own heart ache with uncertainty. 3 days turned into 4 and then 5. There was no news from Landon Shanley. Elise alternated between worry and a quiet anger. Had she been wrong? Had he, confronted with the reality of fatherhood, decided to simply disappear? On the morning of the 6th day, Maris asked the question that hurt the most. Mommy, does Landon not want to be our dad anymore? Elise felt her heart break, seeing the profound sadness in her daughter's eyes. That's not it, honey. I'm sure that's not it. Then why hasn't he come? Elaine insisted. He hasn't even called. Sometimes adults need more time to understand things, Elise tried to explain, although she herself was beginning to harbor doubts. That afternoon, the girls insisted on waiting at the entrance of the building, sitting on the low wall by the gate. What if he comes today? Elaine argued. I want to be the first to see him. Elise didn't have the heart to say no. She allowed them to stay there, visible from the kitchen window, watching every passing car with renewed, desperate hope. The sun was beginning to set when a familiar black car parked across the street. The twins, who were almost giving up, immediately sat up straight. From the window, Elise saw Landon get out of the vehicle. He looked tired, with dark circles visible even from a distance, but there was something in his posture, a determination, a certainty that made her hold her breath. The girls didn't move, as if they feared any movement might make him disappear again. Landon saw them and stopped for a moment, clearly surprised to find them waiting. Then he walked toward them, his steps firm but cautious. Elise hurried down the stairs, wanting to be present for whatever unfolded, but she stopped at a respectful distance, allowing the girls to have their moment. Landon approached the twins, who were still sitting on the wall, their small faces serious and expectant. He knelt before them, bringing himself to their eye level. "Hello," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "Hello," the twins replied in unison, still not smiling, a hint of guardedness in their tones. There was a moment of silence charged with everything that needed to be said. It was Elaine, as always, who spoke first. "We thought you didn't want to be our dad anymore," she said, her usually confident voice now reduced to an insecure whisper. Landon's expression broke upon hearing those words. Elise could see, even from where she stood, the genuine pain in his eyes. "No," he replied immediately, his voice firm despite the evident emotion. "Never think that. Ever." He held out his hands, one for each girl, and they took them after only a moment's hesitation. "I'm sorry I disappeared," he continued. "I had to sort out some important things, to make sure I could keep all the promises I want to make to you." "What things, Maris?" asked ever the pragmatist. Landon smiled, a gentle smile that transformed his tired face. "Grown-up stuff. Work, mostly. I had to reorganize a lot of things to have more free time. Time for what Elaine wanted to know. Time for you," Landon replied, simply, his gaze holding theirs. "Time to be a dad." The twins exchanged glances, that silent communication they always had. Elise could see hope slowly, miraculously returning to their faces. Landon took a deep breath, still holding the girls' hands. "I want you to know something, and I want you to never forget it, no matter what happens." The twins looked at him with absolute attention, their small bodies leaning forward. "Nothing in the world will ever keep me away from you," he declared, his voice filled with an unshakable certainty. "I want to put you on my birth certificate. I want to give you my name. I want to be present for everything, school, presentations, birthdays, ordinary days, every moment. I want to be the father you deserve to have." The girl's eyes widened at his words. For a moment, no one spoke, the immense weight of the promise hanging in the air between them. Then, as if responding to an invisible signal, the twins threw themselves into Landon's arms simultaneously. He hugged them tightly, closing his eyes as he held them against his chest. Elise felt tears streaming down her face as she witnessed the scene. 7 years of worry, of doubts, of sleepless nights, wondering if she had made the right choice, all of it seemed to dissipate before the image in front of her. Landon looked up and saw her standing there. Without letting go of the girls, he extended a hand toward her, inviting her to join them. Elise hesitated for only a second before approaching. When she took his hand, Landon squeezed it firmly, his eyes conveying 1,000 unspoken words. Gratitude, forgiveness, promise. "We're going to make this work," he said, the we encompassing all 4 of them now. Elise nodded, unable to speak, through the tears of relief that now flowed freely. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could truly be a family. 3 weeks had passed since the revelation, 3 weeks of adjustments, heartfelt conversations, and small transformative changes that together were beginning to reshape 4 individual lives into a cohesive family unit. Landon Shanley had kept his promise. He had gone to the courthouse with Elise to formalize his paternity of the twins, giving them his last name. Now, Elaine and Maris Shanley officially carried their father's name, a fact they announced with fierce pride to anyone who would listen. In the small, emerging routine they established, Landon spent the nights at his own apartment, but showed up almost every morning to take the girls to school and returned in the late afternoon, often staying for dinner. Elise watched amazed as he took on the role of a father with a naturalness no one would expect from someone who had just discovered he had 7-year-old twin daughters. On a Friday, Landon arrived earlier than usual. The twins were still at school, and Elise had managed to get a rare day off from work. "I have a surprise," he announced as she opened the door, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. What kind of surprise? Elise asked, genuinely curious. Lately, she had allowed herself to let her guard down a little more each day, seeing how consistent and reliable Landon proved to be. "Actually, there are several surprises," he replied, entering the small apartment. "But the first one is just for the girls. I was thinking of picking them up early from school today and taking them on a special outing. Just them and me." Elise felt a brief moment of hesitation, the protective instinct of a mother who had raised 2 daughters alone for 7 years. But she quickly pushed it aside. "They'll love that. They've been talking non-stop about wanting to spend more time with you. I know this has been an adjustment for all of us," Landon commented, his tone more serious, "especially for you having to share the girls after so long alone with them." Elise appreciated his sensitivity. "It's been easier than I imagined," she admitted, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "Seeing their happiness makes up for any adjustment." Landon nodded, clearly pleased with the answer. "So, can I pick them up today? I promised to bring them back for dinner." Of course, Elise agreed. "I'll call the school and let them know you'll be picking them up." When Landon arrived at the school, the twins were waiting in the office, their little faces lighting up when they saw him. It was still a novelty for them being picked up by their dad, being able to say, "My dad is picking me up today, just like the other children." "Where are we going?" Elaine asked immediately as they got into the car, always direct and curious. "It's a surprise," Landon replied, adjusting the rear-view mirror so he could see their faces in the back seat. Or rather, several surprises. "I love surprises," Elaine exclaimed, while Maris just smiled, her enthusiasm more restrained but equally visible in her sparkling eyes. "Is Mom coming too?" Maris asked, always concerned about including everyone. "Today is a special day just for the 3 of us," Landon explained gently. "A day to celebrate us officially being a family." The girls exchanged excited glances. Since Landon had signed the papers acknowledging his paternity, they carried a new kind of confidence, a security that came from finally having what so many other children had, a present father. Landon drove for about 20 minutes until they reached a large shopping mall. The twins looked up in awe at the high ceiling with sophisticated lighting and the colorful storefronts. First stop, Landon announced, guiding them to a huge toy store, the kind that looks like a children's paradise, with themed sections and interactive displays. The twins' eyes widened as they entered. It was very different from the small neighborhood toy stores they occasionally visited with Elise, usually just to browse or buy a modest birthday present. "You can pick whatever you want," Landon said, smiling at their astonished expressions. "No limits today." Anything Elaine asked, incredulous. Anything Landon confirmed. We're setting up a new room for you, remember. We need proper toys for it. The girls looked at each other for a moment, as if consulting one another in their silent communication, and then set off in slightly different directions. Maris gravitated toward the section with educational games and books. Elaine headed straight to the flashiest and most colorful toys. Landon followed them, watching with interest the distinct choices they made. Maris selected, carefully examining each item before deciding if she wanted it, while Elaine quickly accumulated a pile of things that caught her eye. I don't think we can take all of this, Maris commented worriedly, looking at Elaine's growing collection. Today, Landon assured her, a warmth spreading through him. It's a special day. After nearly an hour, the girls had selected an impressive variety: board games, picture books, science kits, dolls, building blocks, and a dollhouse big enough for them to play with together. As the staff packed everything up, Landon led them to the next stop, an elegant children's boutique with clothes that looked like they were straight out of a catalog. Now, he said, we need new clothes to go with the new toys. The twins seemed almost intimidated as they entered the sophisticated store. A sales associate approached, smiling kindly. How can we help you with anything specific today? We're looking for a complete wardrobe for my daughters, Landon replied, feeling a special warmth as he said my daughters out loud. Clothes for all occasions. The sales associate nodded, professional but visibly excited at the prospect of a large sale. We have beautiful collections for girls. Would you like to see something more casual or clothes for special occasions? Both Landon answered, in anything they like. Once again, the twins' different personalities emerged. Maris went for the more classic and practical pieces, while Elaine was drawn to everything colorful and eye-catching. The associate, noticing their preferences, began bringing options that matched each of their styles. Maris tried on a simple but elegant dress made of light blue cotton with small embroidered details. When she came out of the dressing room, she stood in front of the mirror, almost not recognizing her own reflection. It looks beautiful on you, Maris, Landon Shanley said, watching his daughter with awe as she twirled in the soft blue cotton dress. The color matched the shimmer in her eyes. His eyes, he realized with a pang of emotion. Maris ran her hands gently over the fabric, as if still unsure whether she was really allowed to have something so lovely. I've never had such a pretty dress before, she murmured. That simple offhand comment pierced Landon deeper than anything else could have. He had missed so much. For 7 years, his daughters had gone without the small joys most children take for granted. At that moment, he vowed they would never be without again. By the end of their shopping spree, both Maris and Elaine had entire wardrobes tailored to their individual tastes. Sturdy, vibrant, playful pieces for Elaine, and more refined, calming tones for Maris. Their joy was contagious. Now, Landon said as they stepped out of the boutique with arms full of bags, it's time for one more stop, your new room decor. At the home design store, the girls' contrasting personalities once again revealed themselves. Elaine gravitated to bold colors and whimsical themes. Maris preferred pale pastels and subtle patterns. How are we supposed to decorate one room with this much difference? Maris asked, a trace of worry in her voice. Trust me, Landon said with a wink. I have a plan. After choosing curtains, lamps, throw pillows, and picture frames, he treated them to a final surprise, a towering ice cream sundae with all the toppings they could imagine. They laughed. They teased each other. Landon watched them soaking in the kind of happiness that no boardroom victory had ever given him. That evening, as they returned to the apartment, Landon asked the girls to keep everything secret until morning. Elise Godiva sensed something was up, but didn't press them. At dinner, Landon finally spoke. If you're free tomorrow morning, he said, addressing Elise, I'd like to show you something. All of you. Elise raised an eyebrow, half suspicious, half amused. What is it? A surprise, he answered. The girls giggled. The next morning, Landon drove them out of the city center into a quiet, leafy neighborhood. When they pulled up in front of a 2-story house, Elise looked from the window with visible confusion. Landon, what is this place? He didn't answer. He just opened the door for her, then led them to the entrance. Pulling a key from his pocket, he unlocked the front door. Come in. The interior was airy and filled with light, elegantly decorated but warm. Elise stood still in the foyer, trying to make sense of it all. I bought this house for us, Landon said. For you, for the girls, so they can have a yard, their own room, space to grow. She stared at him, stunned. You bought a house just like that. Not just like that, he said, stepping closer. with every intention. This isn't about making up for the past. It's about investing in the future. Elaine's voice rang down from upstairs. Mom, come see our rooms, Maris echoed from another hall. There's a library room, too. Tears filled Elise's eyes. Landon reached for her hand. No pressure. This house is yours no matter what, even if you need time to decide what family means for us. Elise nodded slowly, overcome by emotion. Are we moving here, Mommy? Elaine asked as the girls raced back down. Elise smiled through her tears. I think we just might. And for the first time in years, all four of them felt like they were standing at the beginning of something whole. Landon left the question for Elise to answer, not wanting to pressure her. Elise took a deep breath, looking around once more at the spacious and welcoming house, at Landon's hopeful face, at her daughter's shining eyes. Her every protective instinct wanted to refuse to maintain her independence, not to accept something so grand. But there was also a new voice inside her, one that spoke of possibilities of a future where her daughters would have everything they deserved, where she herself could finally breathe without the constant suffocating weight of financial worries. I think so, she finally replied, her voice soft but firm, a quiet strength emerging. If that's what everyone wants. The twins screamed with joy, jumping and hugging each other, their delight echoing through the new empty rooms. Landon smiled, a visible relief washing over his face. There's one more thing he said as the initial celebration subsided. I want to show you something special, girls. He led them back upstairs to a closed door they hadn't yet explored. This is a special room he explained for you if you want to be together instead of in your separate rooms. As he opened the door, it revealed a magical space, a large room decorated with a perfect combination of the contrasting styles the twins had chosen at the store. On one side, the soft tones and delicate patterns that Maris preferred. On the other, the vibrant colors and playful elements that Elaine loved. In the center, a common area where the styles blended harmoniously. All the purchases from the previous day, the toys, the decorative accessories were there, perfectly arranged. The dollhouse held a place of honor against one wall, and a bookshelf filled with books covered another. It's our dream room, Maris exclaimed, running inside to explore, her eyes wide with wonder. 2 weeks later, the move was complete. The small apartment at Willow Creek Residences had been exchanged for the spacious house in the tree-lined neighborhood. Elise still worked, but only one job, with hours that allowed her to be home when the girls returned from school. It was in this new chapter of their lives that the first school event with Landon officially as a father took place, a science fair where the twins would present a project on the water cycle which they had prepared with his help. While the other children gave their presentations, Landon stood beside Elise in the audience, the two exchanging proud glances every few minutes. When it was the twins' turn, they stood confidently next to their colorful poster. Our project is about the water cycle. Maris began, her voice clear and firm. And our dad helped us build this model, Elaine added, pointing to the three-dimensional display that showed the process of evaporation and precipitation. The pride on their faces as they said our dad was evident to everyone. After the presentation, when they received warm applause, they ran directly to Landon, who hugged them tightly. You were amazing, he praised, genuinely impressed with their confidence. It was thanks to your help, Maris replied, her arms still around his neck. As Elaine ran off to show something to a classmate, Maris lingered for a moment longer, hugged closely to her father. She leaned in and whispered in his ear, "Good thing we found you. Now you don't have to pretend to be our dad anymore. You're our daddy forever." Landon felt a lump in his throat, unable to respond with words. Instead, he just hugged her tighter, kissing the top of her head. Elise watched the scene from a few steps away, her heart finally at peace. The path to get here hadn't been easy. Years of solitary struggle, of fears and doubts, followed by weeks of adaptation and change. But looking at her family now, her daughters happy and secure, the man she had rediscovered in such an unexpected way, she knew they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with us through this emotional journey, this true story of love, healing, and rediscovery. Your presence wherever you are in the world means more than words can say. If this touching story stirred something in you, if even for a moment it felt like your own, please let us know how it made you feel in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. This isn't the end, just a pause. Bedtime stories may end softly, but real life continues, and so will this one. Stay with us for the next chapter. If this story moved you a like and a subscribe would be a beautiful way to support the channel and keep the stories flowing. Until we meet again, thank you for being part of this inspiring narrative. We'll see you in the next one.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.